Hi everyone, Grant K here for the Flame Premium Learning channel. In this video, we'll take a look at a functionality known as Adaptive Degradation. Now admittedly, this feature is not used often. However, it can be used to improve interactivity when using particular nodes and batch. You can use your own media and sequences to follow along. So the first indication that adaptive degradation is enabled is the yellow triangles next to certain nodes. This is basically telling you that certain processor-intensive operations have been turned off to improve interactivity in the node and in the batch flow graph. However, I want to point out from the start that adaptive degradation will always automatically disable when you preview or render the final frames. You should always get the best quality as well as everything you expect from the render. So let's look a bit deeper into adaptive degradation and examine some of the tools and functions. Now you may have done this intentionally or accidentally, but pressing the Alt-D hotkey toggles adaptive degradation on or off for certain selected nodes. Double-click on an action node for its controls and look at the result view. Now switch to the Node Preferences menu and choose the Adaptive Degradation tab. You can click Active or press Alt-D to turn adaptive degradation on or off. When the option is on and you're looking at the result viewer, the yellow triangle will also be present in the viewer. This is so you don't have to refer to the flow graph or check the node preferences to understand what the viewer is showing. Now there are a whole range of functions that can be manipulated when it comes to degrading the image. You have filtering, shading effects, and geometry properties that can be disabled to speed up actions interactivity. For example, I have selected flares to only be displayed when I render. Secondly, I have also disabled shading on manipulation. This means that as I scrub the time bar, the shadows will be disabled. But as soon as I release the cursor, the composite will process the shadows. I'll set this to always to boost the interactivity a bit more. You would obviously do this once all your lighting is set up and you just want to quickly move around within action. But as I said earlier, if you press Preview or Render, adaptive degradation is disabled and your render will include everything. As soon as the time bar is scrubbed again, adaptive degradation will come back if it is still enabled. Now it does stand to reason that you might have multiple action nodes in the flow graph. So if you want to apply all the adaptive degradation settings from this action to all the other action nodes, you can just click Synchronize All. But everything we have looked at up to this point has just been within an action composite. So how does adaptive degradation fit into the batch flow graph? Well, there are a few options to look at. In the action node preferences, there are a few extra degradation choices when it comes to batch. Motion blur, anti-aliasing, and in-camera depth of field can also be disabled through the flow graph to keep a higher degree of interactivity. However, one point to note, and it can be a point of confusion, is that you can turn on adaptive degradation within the action node. But there is a separate option to carry through or propagate the adaptive degradation through the batch flow graph. Swipe back to batch and set up a dual screen split with Alt-2. Batch schematic on the left and the viewer on the right. Now switch to the batch preferences and here you will find an adaptive degradation tab. At the moment, it is set to Do Not Propagate Degradation. So if action is selected in the flow graph and you see the action result in the viewer, as you scrub the time bar, you can see the degradation taking effect. But if you select a node following on from action and scrub the time bar again, the degradation is disabled and the image in this node has everything applied to it. So the degradation is only happening in this node. Now change the option to Propagate Degradation or press the Ctrl-Alt-D hotkey. The next time you scrub the time bar, the results from the degradation within action are passed through the flow graph upstream to any nodes. So you don't see any flares or shading. One extra option in the batch preferences that is not mapped to a hotkey is Propagate on Time Scrub. So as you scrub the time bar, adaptive degradation is carried through the flow graph. But as soon as you release the cursor, the degradation is disabled and you see a complete result. Now from within any node, you can press Ctrl-Alt-D to turn off adaptive degradation in the flow graph. But I will reiterate that this does not turn off adaptive degradation in the specific nodes. To do that, either go to the Node Preferences menu or select the node in batch and press Alt-D. Now there is one other node besides Action that supports adaptive degradation. Go to the batch node bin and drag out a recursive ops node. By default, recursive ops always has adaptive degradation turned on when you add it into batch. Due to the nature of the processing that recursive ops uses, it can certainly have a hit on performance and interactivity. But you can still use the same hotkeys to toggle it on or off if required. So in summary, adaptive degradation is a two-step choice. Use Alt-D to enable the degradation within the specific nodes. And secondly, use Ctrl-Alt-D to allow the adaptive degradation to be carried through the flow graph. Remember that this functionality is designed to improve interactivity when using particular nodes and batch. However, it will not affect the final quality of your renders. Comments, feedback, and suggestions are always welcome and appreciated. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to the Flame Premium Learning channel for future videos.